I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All right, Unexplained ones, welcome back to All Things Unexplained. I am Dr. Mounts. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, please go ahead and do that, and we really appreciate you. And this episode, we're stepping into one of the strangest moments in modern history, something that I just don't think the general public is fully aware of, a moment where government officials, high-ranking military leaders, intelligence insiders, and even elected senators are openly talking about UFOs, UAPs, and the possibility of non-human intelligence. That's right, we're talking about the age of disclosure and what are our leaders saying about the UFO phenomenon. I just don't think that the general public is aware of what is being said by our political leaders, by our military leaders. And so this episode, we're going to get into a little bit about what is being said on this new documentary, Age of Disclosure. And All Things Unexplained, we're pushing this out there for the broader public awareness. The new documentary, Age of Disclosure, has poured fuel on a fire that's already burning, offering a bold narrative about what might really be happening behind the scenes. But here's the thing, this episode isn't about endorsing Age of Disclosure or debunking it or labeling it as a psyop. No, instead, we're taking a closer look at some of the claims and the conversations now unfolding at the highest levels of power. We'll play some recent clips from key figures across the military and political world, people who, until recently, would never have said these things in public. And then we'll stack all that against Marco Rubio's very pointed comments on the Hannity Show. Is this a disclosure process, a psyop, a political maneuver, a misunderstanding, or something so big that it defies all of those categories? This episode, we're laying it all out, not to tell you what to think, but to show you what's being said and explore what it might mean for all of us. So we do need to come to grips that portions of things like Age of Disclosure could be a psyop. So I think it would be useful to define psyop here. A psyop, which stands for psychological operation, is a planned military or political activity using information to influence the emotions, motives, reasoning, and behavior of foreign audiences to achieve objectives, often involving propaganda, digital campaigns, or cultural influence, and can range from overt messages to covert deception, though recently the term is also used casually for perceived government conspiracies. But I want to focus in on one particular word here from the definition or words, and that is foreign audiences. Now, we know that certainly the CIA has done psyops on foreign audiences. We've had CIA assets go on podcasts recently and say, no, we do not do psyops on the American public. We do not do psyops on American citizens. Now, I want you all to stay tuned about that, because All Things Unexplained, we've got an episode coming out real soon. An explosive discovery we made in the JFK files that proves otherwise, that proves the CIA has indeed ran psyops on American citizens. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, sure, Age of Disclosure, it's chock full of political leaders, scientists, military figures. The possibility is certainly there for something else to be going on. And what that is, I can't say. I don't know. But I think we do need to ask ourselves if this is some sort of psychological operation on the American public. To what end? What is the goal of all these leaders telling us that our airspace is being invaded by something otherworldly, something we can't control, something we can't stop, something we don't know who is operating it, and something we don't know what it wants. Let's start with Mike Gallagher, U.S. Representative on Age of Disclosure, and he said, there's something violating our airspace. There's something fouling arranges that even the people we've tasked in the executive branch to understand this cannot provide an explanation. So I would say, in addition to the national security implications, this has implications for basic trust and confidence in the American government. That was Mike Gallagher, U.S. Representative. And I'll repeat, there's something violating our airspace. Did you know that we had elected officials talking about an invasion of our airspace? It's pretty shocking if you think about it. There's also Mike Rounds, U.S. Senator. We just simply don't know the origin of the phenomenon. And we're going to try to get to the bottom of it, because for national defense purposes, some of these things have been in areas where we train. These have been in areas where we've got some of our best equipment, and yet our best equipment has not been able to tag these things. We've not been able to go in and catch them. So here we have a U.S. Senator talking about something that he describes as the phenomenon entering our military airspace, and we can't do anything about it. It's pretty intriguing that he says we simply don't know the origin of the phenomenon. So yes, I understand that by phenomenon he could be talking about the phenomenon of a foreign adversary's technology entering into our airspace. But we all know that we refer to this thing as the UFO phenomenon. I think he used that term quite intentionally there, phenomenon. Dan Crenshaw on Age of Disclosure, U.S. Representative, he's the one with the eye patch, you know him. He said, no matter what they are, they're invading our airspace. So he's echoing the words of Mike Gallagher here. And we don't know exactly why they're doing it, what their intent is, and what their capabilities are. So again, we have a term here, invading. This suggests something quite nefarious. We also have discussion here from Dan Crenshaw of another more disturbing aspect of the phenomenon that is talked about in places like UFO Twitter, but hardly ever out loud. And that is, who's doing it? Why are they doing it? What their intent is? What are their capabilities? These are indeed dangerous, frightening questions to contemplate. We had even more shocking statements on age of disclosure, like those by Jay Stratton, former senior intelligence official on the UAP topic, who said, "The fact that the FAA is not tracking UAP is putting American lives at risk every day." You know, this calls back a few years ago, Super Bowl weekend. All of a sudden, NORAD changes the parameters of their sensors, and boom, they've got UAP on their sensors. Suddenly, we have fighter jets engaging UFOs over American and Canadian soil. One was shot down near Dead Horse, Alaska. We don't know anything else about it, except the military said, "Nothing to see here. We obliterated it. Let's all just forget about it." One researcher in Canada, through their FOIA process, did obtain one photograph, a grainy, blurry blob squatch of a photo that someone literally photocopied and sent it back to them. And that's the best we've got. That's the most information we've got on multiple UFOs that were engaged by American fighter jets. So yeah, we need to take heed of the fact that the FAA doesn't even track UAP. But yet we know overseas right now, Belgium and other countries, we've got airports shutting down. All Things Unexplained looked into this, and we discovered that the closing of these airports was no simple task. It required going through a complex process that began with trained observers or technological detection of UAP. And then it went through a very complex flowchart of processes that had to be undertaken before the call could be made to shut down an airport. So we know that there are serious things happening in our skies alongside our commercial aircraft. It wasn't that long ago, a fighter jet went missing over the Carolinas. The pilot had to eject, landed in somebody's yard, and they used their home phone to call 911. The impact radius of that fighter jet, unknown, and never relayed to the public. The major population areas within the strike radius of that fighter jet never relayed to the public. Safety concerns never relayed to the public. We know that recently we had another UAV involved in an incident outside of Area 51, and friend of All Things Unexplained, Jorg Arnu, with the Dreamland Resort website in Rachel, Nevada, he figured out where it went down. He went to investigate, and he was met by armed guards. So while you would be inclined to believe that if there were incidents between commercial aircraft and UAP, that we might know about it, I'm not exactly so sure that that's the case. As a matter of fact, I think it's quite possible that we have had encounters between commercial aircraft and UFOs or UAP. And the extent to what that has done to those aircraft, that's unknown. We also had a fair amount of everybody's favorite lawmaker, to quote Tim Burchett, U.S. Representative. Some of the things he had to say on age of disclosure are, the defense contractors give money legally to a lot of my colleagues that provide a great deal of the pushback on this. There, Burchett's talking about trying to get to the bottom of these special access programs, these black budget programs, where the money is going, that is funding the possibility of reverse engineering of alien technology, of recovered UAP. All Things Unexplained, we've been investigating an underground base just down the road from CJ and myself. It's the inspiration for the creepy facility in Stranger Things. It's said to be 13 stories deep, and yet it has no known official function. But I can tell you, it's clear that it's doing something. And whatever it is, it's costing a lot of money. And guess what? You are not going to figure out where that line item is in the budget. That facility is owned by AT&T. And there's going to be a lot more about it in our book, Voices in the Shadows, due out next year, 2026, by Schiffer Publishing. Stay tuned, folks, for that. Burchett went on to add, something with the capability of traveling light years, not showing a heat signature and the energy capabilities of that would put the Pentagon out of business. We wouldn't be fighting these worthless wars overseas over oil, and American boys and girls wouldn't be dying. It would put the war pigs out of business. Outside of Age of Disclosure, Burchett has also made the rounds on several podcasts and news appearances. Here's what he had to tell Ross Coulthart on News Nation about briefing President Trump on UAPs, as well as underwater bases and the possibility that the aliens are watching us.
President Trump's position on this. Do you think he's still amenable or open or receptive to the idea of being more open about UAPs as he promised during his campaign for the second administration?
I think he is. I still think he is. I've put a lot of faith and trust in mine and his relationship. I don't bother him about stuff all the time. I've asked for a 15-minute meeting with him, and I would like to discuss. There's 2 or 3 things I want to bring up to him that I think would go a long way, and one of those is this issue from some Navy officials that had, in fact, had broached that subject to me. I always remember the last thing this one fellow said, because you've been in my office, but you come in one door and you can go out the other if you choose. And nobody ever does. They just go out the entrance they came up. He chose to go out the other door so he could kind of get away from all the other. And the last thing he said was, he looked at me and said, "Tim, they're real." And I'll never forget that. And it led me to believe that he had more information.
And to be very clear about this, Tim, what you're saying is that these objects underwater, these bases underwater, they are non-human. You're clear about that?
That would be my belief, yes, sir. We don't have the capabilities of traveling there or doing anything else.
Clearly, something is operating in our oceans very close to the continental United States. And as you've speculated, it's perhaps using it for some kind of surveillance.
100%. That's the only reason that would be doing it. When the numbers go up and then they drop off to almost nothing, and then you have these clusters that occur, and that would lead you obviously to believe that something is observing us, or we're observing something, and we're observing them. But I guess it still just bothers me that our government won't come forward with it, because and the guys on the intelligence committee. I think, and gals, I think you have a few in there that just want to dissuade us from finding out what the real truth is.
One of the most interesting figures on Age of Disclosure is U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to tell you a little bit of what Rubio said on Age of Disclosure. We'll break that down and then compare that to what he told Sean Hannity recently. The most incendiary thing that Rubio said in Age of Disclosure was this: we've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. And it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. That alone, just that statement alone, deserves inquiry, deserves attention, deserves focus. Now, when you first hear this on Age of Disclosure, you might think that Rubio himself said that Rubio said, we've had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities, and it's not ours, and we don't know whose it is. But after listening to it again and reading it on paper again, I think I've realized that Rubio didn't say that at all. Instead, it seems like that's what someone else told Rubio. Someone else, you see, told Rubio that we've had repeated instances of something operating over nuclear facilities, and we don't know what it is, but it's not ours. And Rubio said that statement that someone told him deserves inquiry, deserves attention, and deserves focus. Rubio's statements on Age of Disclosure remind us about some shocking footage and photographs on a previous All Things Unexplained episode near a nuclear site over the Carolinas. One of the objects appeared to be a gray triangular prism attached to a glowing emerald green object. What exactly did that witness photograph and video? No one ever determined. Now, my theory that Rubio was referring to someone else's comments was backed up by a recent appearance by Rubio on Sean Hannity. Here's what he had to say there.
Really serious issues involving national security, peace around the globe. Yeah. I mean, you're at the highest level of discussions, and we're going to get into a lot of the hot spots and success and all that. But I've got to ask you, there's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure.
Yeah.
Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asks you about it?
Sure.
It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours, and presidents operate on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that is...
So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. It was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So it wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I have people that came forward to us. You know, some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say, that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So right. I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you know, you're trying to sell a show there. But the fundamental comments, I haven't seen it, but the clips I've seen and people have shown me are fundamentally true, and that is there are things, we know this has been documented, there have been things that fly over the airspace, restricted airspace, be it where we're conducting military exercises or the like, and everyone in the government says they're not ours. And so what I worry most about, just me personally, is that some adversary, another country, for example, has developed looking for missiles and fighter jets, and they're coming at us with drones and balloons. Yeah. I remember, you know, when NORAD turned on the radars and started looking for balloons, all of a sudden they spotted a bunch of balloons flying overhead, and 90% of them were innocent, you know, things. A couple of them were Chinese. And so, but we never look for balloons because our radars aren't trained for that. So that really was the point I was trying to drive at. I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. Mm-hmm. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the U.S. government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the U.S. government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, you know, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
So as we wrap up this episode of All Things Unexplained, one thing is becoming clear. The narrative around UFOs and UAPs is shifting faster than ever. And it's no longer fringe, it's no longer whispered, and no longer coming only from experiencers and researchers. It's coming from senators, admirals, intelligence officers, fighter pilots, and people who spent their entire careers inside the national security machine. But here's the real question. Why now? Why are these statements suddenly allowed? Why are you, the general public, hearing these things? Why is the messaging sometimes feeling coordinated and sometimes feeling completely contradictory? Whether Age of Disclosure reflects an emerging truth, a psychological operation, one that's been done on the American public, no less, or perhaps to confuse our enemies. A controlled release of information, or something else entirely. The one thing we cannot deny is this conversation has reached the mainstream. It's reached all of you, and the stakes feel higher than ever. What you've heard this episode isn't fiction. These are the words of our leaders. This is the public record. And it's up to all of us to interpret it, question it, and decide what direction we think humanity is heading. So again, this is Dr. Mounts, and this has been All Things Unexplained. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I want to encourage all the unexplained ones out there to get off your screens some this week. Get out into the woods. Look up at the skies. You may not find a Sasquatch. You may not see a UAP or even a meteor shower. But you might just find something even more important. You might just find yourself out there. Thanks, Unexplained Ones. We really appreciate you. Let's stay curious out there, stay open-minded, and remember, the truth may be stranger than we think, or just stranger than we're being told. Until next time.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.